Okay, so I guess that's it. Can you hear me correctly? Yes. Okay. So thank you everyone to be here today, and I'm very happy to being able to be here to speak about one of my projects from several years ago. So first, quick presentation about me. I'm a Python and testing fan, as you can imagine. I'm a former Mercurial reviewer, and I currently work for Comet.ml, which is doing a monitoring solution for machine learning, but it's not the subject today. And you can find me with my pseudo, Lotialdran, almost everywhere around the web. So let's start by a question. Who in this room is writing unit tests? Okay, so pretty much everyone. And who in this room is not writing unit tests, but executing them? Okay, so that's pretty much the majority. So I have a good news. We are not alone. In fact, more than 70% of the JetBrains developer ecosystem survey answer that they are at least running unit tests, and most of them are writing then running unit tests. So a bit of background. I actually do both because I'm writing Python most of the time and sometimes JS. So of course, when I'm writing some code, I'm writing some tests. And when I write some tests, I run them. So with the experience, I've learned how to run all of my tests, subset of my tests, or a single test, check why my new test is not running, or I know it should fail, but it doesn't, so why? I know where to find the data I need in the output of the test runners to understand why it's failing or not. And I know how to debug a failing test efficiently, either resorting on debugger or adding some prints and knowing exactly where it should appears. But this knowledge, I took it from a lot of years of actually writing tests, running tests, and debugging them. And when you first come to run tests in Python, so for example with PyTest, is the interface you can use, you can have. So you have pretty much everything, but you need to know where to find them. And if you move then to JavaScript with, for example, Jest, it's a totally different interface. So for beginners, it's very hard to being able to use both tools efficiently, at least in the beginning. So that's for the language I'm the most able to write, because that's what I'm using from day to day. But I'm actually also, unfortunately, the CI expert is almost all of my jobs, and I am the one guy in the office or remotely when people say, hey, my build is failing, but I don't know why. I'm, okay, send me a link. Okay, you have this broken dependency, or you have a national failure that you are expecting true, but it's false. Let's try to debug that. So I have to understand failures from random tooling that I don't know they existed in the first place. I have to find the data in the output and maybe add them, because by default, I don't know, you don't have logs, or you have logs but in info and not in debug, stuff like that. From time to time, I even have to run them, those tests, either on another server to see if the server configuration is impacting the test, or locally. And then, okay, so you need to install this package in this way, then run this weird command with those flags. So if not, that won't work. So all with an unfamiliar language, a tool, an interface. So I was unhappy about this situation. And so I decided that we need some common tooling. We are engineers, we love to write tooling, so let's write a tool that can bring all of this information into a single interface. So what do we want in an interface? So my Christmas list. Yours can be different, but I think most of them will be there. So first, color, because when you are reading thousands of lines, colors definitely helps. Progress bar, of course. We're launching only failing tests. because if you have a build that takes 3 hours, you don't want to add another 3 hours to your debugging session just when you add a print. Launch specific test. You might know exactly which test you want. It's either a failing one or one that should be failing, but you know it should be failing, but it's not. And finally, a web interface. So what I did with this Christmas list is I turned it into an interface. Let's meet Balto. So Balto is a language independent test orchestrator. Balto checks all of the wish list. It has colors, progress bar. We're launching failing test only, launching specific test. And if you don't trust me, I will show you with a live demo. Wish me luck. Okay, so here is Balto. Can you see correctly? Okay, so you can collect all of the tests, which will ask the Underwood test runner to give you all the tests you have in your test suite. You can select a single test, which will give you some very basic information because you didn't run everything yet. So let's try to run this one specifically. So here I get some new data. So I know that the test is passing, which is good. I get some additional tooling. And if I launch everything now, let's launch those 2 files at the beginning. We can see that we get some failure with some throwback. And now we can launch everything. And you can see that you have, it's actually not a good idea to have not mirroring my screen, but you have like std out, you have stdr somewhere, you have logs, you have everything I need when I debug test suite. So, okay, but that's not why I'm here. Let's go back here. Okay. So Balto, what is doing under the hood to get all of your data? Balto is launching subprocess. Okay, but what is the big secret of Balto? It's reading the subprocess std out. That's it. But they still need one little piece. The plugin, which is running in the test runner, the web server and the UI need to speak the same language. So what are the possible language to talk with each other? Because you might have, here is both Python, the example it was in with PyTest, and the interface in JavaScript. So there's already some couple of output formats. So you might know some of all of them. You have JUnit, tap, mozlog, and subunit. So JUnit, very quickly, it's based on XML. It's well known and used in the Java community. It's one big XML file at the end of the build. Its format is tied to JUnit. There's no independent definition of it. And it's non-streamable. As it's one big file at the end, you need to wait for the end of the build before being able to consume it, of course. You have also tap, which is mostly famous in the Perl community. In the Perl community. It's simple, but hard to extend. I didn't put an example here, but you can take a look online. Its format is also tied to the tap Perl implementation. There's no independent definition of it, and it needs then an independent parser in both Python and JS. So it was not good.
So what sense there is no independent definition?
I mean that you don't have the format is deeply tied to the default implementation. There is no if you want to discuss the tap format, you need to create issue on the tap Perl implementation for tap. Okay, I didn't know. So, okay, I will update the slide then.
Nobody used the YAML extension, but in theory,
Okay.
it's supported. At least the parser parses it. It's already started.
Yeah. Okay, so the question was, what is non-independent definition? And you get the answer. So, sorry.
I'm not very familiar with that, but it seems it has several producers and consumers. So if I would have to do something with tests, that would be my starting point.
Okay, hopefully I will offer another solution for that. So the comment was, there's already several producers and consumers in several languages. So as a starting point, he will start with that. So there's also Mozlog, which is used internally at Mozilla. And one particular design choice was that you have one message at the beginning of an execution of a test and one message at the end, which means that readers need to keep some kind of state. And I decided that one test equal one message is easier to consume. The last one is subunit, which is actually the closest to design to what I have designed. It's a binary format, while the other one are text-based. An effort has been made to try merging actually subunit and LTF, which I will present just after. And the biggest issue was that subunit doesn't have an input format. So what was, again, my Christmas list? So my Christmas list was a format which is easy to write and easy to read, which is streamable because here with Balto it's a desktop application, so you get all the data in real time from a WebSocket connection, but you can have also on the CI, and as soon as you get a failing test, you can mark the CI build as read without needing to wait for the full build to be finished. And finally, a format defined outside of an implementation. Code dies with age, while formats defined independently can continue to evolve and get hopefully more traction and more tooling if it's not tied to a specific implementation and specific usage. So I decided a new format. So what do we need in this format? We need a test name, we need a test status, and we need an error message. So let's use JSON. Can you read correctly?
No. No, but
Okay.
it's not a joke, but you are asking, so I'm telling I'm blind, so
Okay.
if you will read, that's fine.
Okay. Sorry. So there's two examples, was with pacing test and one with failing one. So there's actually a missing piece. We will want one message at the beginning, which tells us how many tests we are going to have in the test suite, and one at the end for the total duration and the number of failing tests, passing tests. But we could add more data, and I actually showed you more data in the Balto demo. We can have timing, log message, stdio, stdout, stdr, text and image diff. For example, if you've done some snapshot testing either on the front end or with some specific test runner on the command line, snapshot testing is when you expect a full HTML page or full text and you get something else. So you want to diff around, you want to diff what was expected and not, and find file, line, and more. There was actually also one stuff missing. How do you launch a specific test? That's a good question because it's dependent to all different languages, different test runner, even in the same, with the same languages, different test runner might have different way to run a specific test if they have one in the beginning. So we talk about output formats, which is just like JUnit, Mozlog, subunit, but we were missing something. We need also an input format. Why? Because when you want to run a specific test, you don't want any tool that need to do that, having, okay, so for PyTest, the command line is this way, for Jest, the command line is this way, for knows the command ID this way, you will be duplicate everything. While if you define an input format, all the tools can implement it in their plugin, which is already needed for the output format. So if you have also an input format, any tool can actually use this format to talk with the test runner. So there's two main cases. One is I just want to collect all the different tests in the test suite. And the other one is I want to run specific files or specific node IDs. But for nodes, that's a bit hard, because how do you format nodes? We have the same issue. So let's ask the different test runner to add it, and let's create an ID field. So whatever unique ID a test runner can generate, you send it back to whatever consumer, for example, Balto, and we can send it back to say, hey, this specific test, I want to run only it. So give it to you. I don't know anything about how it was formatted, created, does it include the test hash, whatever. I don't care. Just run it again. So if we take a full example, here is a valid LETF output with both the name, the unique ID, which is, again, obscure for Balto, the outcome, and the error. So that's the format I'm trying to define. It's called LETF for Language Independent Test Format. It's defined in its repository, independent, which lists both producer and consumer. So that means we can have discussion and effort independently from any implementation. Each message that I gave an example is defined in its own with JSON schema, because it's quite easy to actually say what is required, what are the kind of type that you are expecting. One thing that was, I think, very, very important is that you have in this repository helpers and tools which can help you both validate streams that you are creating or input streams. So when you are developing a plugin, for example, a test runner in Rust, you don't have to. You don't need a consumer to tell you, okay, it's valid. You have an independent format, which is independent test suite, which tell you, okay, this is valid. Any consumer should accept it and understand it. Might be some edge cases in consumers, but at least the stream is valid. So what is the missing data? It's currently working for me. I'm using Balto with Python in my day-to-day job. So the two main things I see right now is a version number, because hopefully it will evolve, and binary data. As it's based on JSON, binary is kind of hard to send if you want to send images for diffing or any output which might not be valid Unicode. You have an issue. So I know what is missing. But it works for me. It works for the test runner I'm using. I'm trying to create a plugin for Jest in JavaScript, but I realized that in Jest, the logs are not grouped per test. They are for the whole test file. So you need to dispatch. You don't have lines, for example, for specific tests. So there's some limitation. So I'm trying to get more languages to support it, to see what kind of assumption I made in the language itself of what a test runner have and can send me. And actually, some test runner cannot give me lots. Like, I expected to get a line and a file from every test, but apparently that's not the case. So I'm looking specifically for those languages, but if you want to have LETF support for your own test runner in other languages, I will be very happy to have it also, and more importantly, get your feedback on the format itself to being able to support everything. One thing which is also on the to-do list is currently I'm launching subprocesses and running std out, but it's only a stream. So I could also load a stream from an SSH connection or from a Docker container remotely. I had it working in the past. I have a bug right now that I need to fix, but it's working. It's written in Python. So thanks to Python new capabilities in Python 3, it's asynchronous. So that also means that if you have a project with a backend and a frontend written in two different languages, which is a good possibility, you could actually run both of your tests in a single tool in parallel. So that would be awesome. I don't have the case myself. I'm doing only Python, but that's definitely possible. So the architecture, just for a reminder, is Balto is speaking only about LETF compatible plugin or processes. If any of the test runner will implement LETF directly, that will mean there's no need for plugin. But until it's the case, a plugin will do. And might actually be helpful for getting all the std out, stdr, and be sure that if the test runner is failing, we get something to catch it and send something back to Balto. So in conclusion, LETF is a new protocol because I think it's input and output, and similar to HTTP or LSP, if you know about it. So LSP is a language server protocol. It's a new protocol pushed by Microsoft, so your IDE could talk to any LSP compatible servers. So you have one LSP server for Python, which can be used from Emacs, maybe not Nano, VS Code, Sublime Text. So it's exactly like LETF. It's cutting down the compatibility matrix to one format. So everything that's talking LSP or LETF will be able to talk to each other. So I hope that it will be a foundation that could be used for building tomorrow tools around testing. And for example, if you want a curse tool to run your test, you can. And if it's speaking LETF, it will be compatible with any LETF test runner. And if you want a detailed HTML report about your test timing, you also can. And again, if it's speaking LETF, it will be compatible with all LETF test runners. So if you want to test Balto, the instructions are online. You need to install PPX because packaging in Python is hard for now. I hope in the future I will get a better solution to avoid installing something else. But then once you have Balto on your system, you install the LETF plugin for your test runner, and then you can enjoy. So how can you help? Any feedback about LETF is a good feedback. It's young, so nothing was in stone yet. You can create new LETF producer, any plugin for whatever test tool you are using or designing. You can create new LETF consumer. I will be very happy to get both ecosystem on both ends of the format and use Balto or speak about it. Of course, both Balto and LETF are open source on my GitHub account. Feel free to open issue or best send pull request. And that's it for me. So I have time for question. Thank you. We have one question there. Yeah.
You talked about an input format and an output format.
Yeah.
But the Balto tooling was discovering the tests as well.
Yeah.
How do you do that without a discovery protocol?
Yeah. So in the input so the question was in my presentation I talked both about input format and output format. So when I speak about the input format, the first example is the input that Balto is sending to the plugin, which is just collect only, and then the test runners itself has already all the code to just collect the tests without running them. And so it's sending back a specific message for test collection without the status, without the timing, stuff like that. Does that answer your question?
No. How do you discover the test at the first place?
The question was, how do you discover the test in the first place? So there's a config file for Balto at the root of the test dir. So I'm just detecting the config file, and then I'm pointing the test runner to that directory. Yeah.
You were saying that color is important, and indeed it is. The test runners themselves cannot color in them, either because the tests are checking color on the text, or because there is color information like words are different, something like that. Do you plan to have something special to support exchanging that color information in the output?
So if I understood the question correctly, is that test runner can actually have colors in the data they send back to whatever consumer. So I plan to support it in Balto. Yes, sure, we need to find a way to encode it and being able to transmit it. But yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Question. So what you can also do with this test framework, unit test framework, is writing more broader tests, such as integration tests or even system tests when it goes up to UI tests. And what I often observe is that as broader your tests became, as more important the environment became for you. So you might constantly doing an integration test, and that depends with the database. And on some database versions it works, and on other ones it maybe doesn't work. Do you see any possibility to have this environment information put into these input files there and say, okay, now test, I don't know, when you write MS SQL, use MS SQL Server and use test this for MS SQL Server 2008 for backend until 2019. Because I think that's really currently the blind spot of many test frameworks.
Definitely. So the question was, when you're doing tests, for example, when you are testing against the database and you might have your tests working with one version of the database and not another, or different database might have different failure. So do I plan to support that? Yes, I plan to support that in Balto. For now, likely with both matrix definition and Docker Compose support. You can bring up your database automatically and snapshot it. But I'm not sure how it will involve the LETF format, apart from sending the information about the environment and which testing matrix combination you are testing. Yeah.
You said that subunit was a binary format?
Yeah.
LITF doesn't seem to be.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So what are the links between the LITF and subunit?
Okay. So the question was, I said that subunit was a binary format, while LTF was a text format, and it was asking me what are the links. The binary versus text is likely, the fact that LTF is a text format is mostly just for easiness to write and read, because JSON is easy to write, easy to read, you have library and everything. Subunit is more designed to handle higher loads, and it has capabilities to actually filter streams, split streams, merge streams. So if we have to support binary outputs, for example, in LTF, we likely have to move to a binary format anyway. But for now, it's text because it's easier. Okay, yeah.
How do you store the test results? I assume basically the output of the producers, but I don't know if the Balto is capable of that. I closed it and I loaded it again, then I can view the past results.
Okay. Okay. The question was, how do I test results? For now, I don't. Balto is only a tool for desktop. But with LTF, I hope that we can get CI system, which are much more smarter and will have to store data. For now, I don't.